Hello everyone, Arcblight here. I wanted to start this video off with a little bit of a disclaimer. This top 10 PlayStation 1 games video is a list of my top 10 games. It does not reflect what the top 10 games of all time were, or what were the best-selling games of all time. It's simply the top 10 games that stood out the most to me, and sometimes it's just because of nostalgia. So with that in mind, let's get this video started. So at number 10, I have Mega Man X4. Being a big fan of Mega Man X 1 through 3, 4 was an awesome game to me simply because it allowed me to finally play as Zero. He was always my favorite X character, and I love how he had his own unique playstyle compared to Mega Man, and that he could still get new powers from beating each boss as well. The game was super challenging and was also the last Mega Man game I have given a chance to, so maybe I'll try out some newer ones in the future. At number 9, I have RPG Maker. While not technically a normal game, so to speak, I think this still needed to make its way onto my list because it blew my mind at the time that when I was using this, I could create my own game in which to tell my own creative story. Me and my friends would spend hours creating our own stories, which would motivate each other to work harder and put more energy into the creation itself. From here, I even moved on and tried other RPG makers on PC as well, and have always respected the way this game opened my eyes to game creation. At number 8 is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. This game consumed me and many friends for hours on end. It even inspired us to try out skateboarding ourselves and even pushed us into watching X Games and finding our own favorite pro skaters. Mine was Rodney Mullen at the time, FYI. As unrealistic as this game might have been, I feel like it made a huge mark on the world and made people way more aware of the skating scene, and for that, I'll always appreciate it. Coming in at number 7 is Final Fantasy IX. Let me state, while Final Fantasy VII does not make it on this list, I still hold a lot of respect for the game, but other Final Fantasy games stood out more to me, and that is mainly because I happened to play Final Fantasy 8, 9, and 10 before going back to try 7. So with Final Fantasy IX, I was in love with the game due to the more cartoon-like design of the characters and the world. I say cartoon-like only in the aspect that these characters looked less realistic to me than the other ones that were found in other Final Fantasy games, and I was a fan of the more humorous characteristics that this game had, while still having a deep story and a very enjoyable game style. Though I still remember one part where I was only leveling up characters that were my favorites, and I was kind of leaving the other ones alone, and when I got to the 4th disc, there's a part in the story where they split up your characters into groups, and when that happened, all the characters I wasn't leveling all of a sudden had to step up and be useful, and I actually had to restart the game to be able to properly level up the characters for when that moment came back. Super frustrating, but it's a moment I definitely remember. Next up at number 6 is Parasite Eve. I don't even know how I got my hands on this game back in the day, but I was hooked. It felt like a Final Fantasy game meets a Resident Evil game, and I played this game from beginning to end. I also enjoyed playing the sequel as well, and if they ever came out with like a new game, I'd probably give that a shot as well. It made just enough of a unique impact on me that I definitely had to add it to this list. The game freaked me out the whole time, but captivated me in the playstyle and creativity of what they were doing. Now at number 5, this is a good follow-up because it's actually Resident Evil 2. I played the first Resident Evil, but only for a short amount of time. I remember it being way too scary for me at the time, but eventually I got my hands on Resident Evil 2 and happened to push through the entirety of the game. I was freaked out most of the time, and I remember constantly hesitating to enter every new area that I came across, and I had to have one of my friends around each time that I played the game, but eventually I did beat it, and I always think back on those times. Now on to number 4 with Legend of Mana. This game had its cons here and there, but I was hooked on it for so long. One of my friends was really into it as well, so we motivated each other to keep playing, and we would frequently team up in co-op for hours on end. I've always been a fan of this art style, and always had to play the next Squaresoft game or the next Mana style game, and this was definitely a gem of a game to me. At number 3, I have Final Fantasy Tactics. This was the first tactics style game that I invested time into, and I was absolutely in love with this game right from the start. I enjoyed the story very much and the strategic playstyle. I remember trying to build a perfect team for every scenario, and I even remember getting stuck at one boss fight for a long time. I saved at a bad spot, which was a huge issue for a lot of games, so I couldn't go back and level up before jumping into the fight again. I eventually beat the boss, but it required numerous tries before finding success. And after this game, I went out and I tried to find every other tactics style game that I could, all thanks to Final Fantasy Tactics. At number 2, I have The Legend of Dragoon. In a time where Final Fantasy games were everywhere and at the top of the charts on almost every system, at least in terms of RPGs, Legend of Dragoon was an amazing game developed by Sony. The combat was incredible to me because while it was still turn-based, it had attacks that you had to time button presses to get the highest damage output. The story was really amazing as well. I was enthralled from the beginning to the end of this game and still remember the emotional toll that some of the cinematics had on me, and how some of the twists and betrayals in this game also had me so devastated. I don't want to spoil anything, so all I'll say is, Lavitz. And now, at number 1, I have Final Fantasy VIII. A controversial choice, I'm sure, but this game definitely held the most memories for me and was one of the very first games that captivated me with the storylines. And am I the only one who desperately wanted a gunblade? That weapon is like one of the coolest weapons I've ever seen still to this day. This was also the first game where I had a strategy guide to help me out with getting all the secrets. I also had a friend at school who was playing as well, so every day we went to school, we would compare how far we made it the night before or over the weekend. All of this added together and made for one of the most memorable gaming experiences that I've ever had, so I had to put Final Fantasy VIII in the number 1 spot. So with my list finished, what games were your favorite on the PlayStation? Is your list drastically different than mine? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more content in the future. As always, everyone, thanks for watching.